And I'm substituting at the moment for Michael McGrath TD. I'm not calling myself a super sub or anything, but I hope I can engage in a positive manner. First of all, I want to extend a welcome to Minister Canny and his officials, particularly Mr. Buckley, who is a constituent of mine. In the past, he's been a champion of creating jobs and a great advocate for, creating employment in some of the forgotten counties like Roscommon. So I wish you well in your role. I have a number of questions that I want to put to the Minister, and I want to also acknowledge that we've engaged a lot, Minister. You're a good engager. You have visited a lot of localities that have been devastated by flooding. Certainly there have been some movement on schemes. I acknowledge that. But there are a few questions that I would like to put to you today and to your officials. If you look at the flood risk management programme, over a 2-year period, there's a reduction of 12 million. The allocation in 2015 was over 87 million. And if you look, if I'm correct, at the allocation for 2017, we're looking at 75 million. Now, I'd like to know the reason for the scale of that reduction over that 2-year horizon. And, was the full allocation drawn down over the years? I might get an answer to that initially.
Initially, I can tell you that there's a carryover of 7 million from the previous year, which was spent 2016. Isn't that it?
It was a carryover.
Along with the full allocation. So we effectively, in 2016, we spent in excess of 52 million on flood relief alone, which was a record spend for flood relief specifically in any 1 year. We spent the 45 plus the 752. Okay.
That's fine. There also appears to be a substantial reduction in the level of funding provided to local authorities for minor works. Now, again, I'm going to go into a 3-year framework, 2014, 2015 and 2016. If you look at 2014, the allocation was 9 million. 2015, it was 16 million. And in 2016, it was down to 3 million, according to figures I have. Now, if you take that same period at the level of funding I have looked at, it shows a sharp decline. The number of proposed projects increased from 27 in 2014 to 55 in 2015 and 83 in 2016. Now, how can this be reconciled? Is it a situation where the OPW are carrying out the works itself as opposed to funding the local authority as regards those minor works?
The minor works to date, the amount of funding which is approved to local authorities to date since the scheme came in is 37.621 million. The local authorities have drawn down 30.421 million. The value of works directly undertaken by the OPW is 1.5 million. The number of approved projects is 597 and the number of them that's completed is 435. Estimated number of properties protected was 6,153. I think on average each year, Deputy, there's approximately 3 million being spent on minor works. And the idea that there's no reduction in it, it's basically we'll fund what the local authorities look for. And they've looked for, I think, something like there was maybe a spike there where there was, it might be referred back to 2014, there was 9.34 million, and then the next year there was 16.83 million, but they're related to storm damage, which was a specific fund for storm damage at the time, whereas the normal flood relief, minor work flood reliefs are averaging about 3 million per annum. There's no reduction. We pay out based on the funds that are actually applied for by the local authorities, and it's averaging around 3 million per year.
All right. Would you and your officials look at the possibility of, broadening that minor work schemes? Because I think it's accepted that local authorities, could solve a lot of those problems in the short term, rather than have to go through the OPW with every project. Would it not be a good thing to look at the possibility of broadening that minor work scheme?
When you talk about broadening it, I presume you mean doing more work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I've written to the local authorities last year, to every CE last year, inviting them to make more applications that we can give them more money. But there's a number of things. There's the capacity of the local authorities, within their own to carry out these works, or even to get the paperwork done to get it into us. But definitely, more money can be spent. There's no cap on what can be spent. The other thing which I'm doing with my officials is we're looking at the scheme itself to review it, to see, looking at the cost benefit, looking at other areas of it, to see how we can make it more attractive, one might say. But definitely there's a huge interest in it from the local authorities, and if they want to put in for additional monies, that can be looked at. We're not capping the money, or we're not saying we won't give you any money if the scheme meets the criteria. And it is, as you say, a very good scheme.
Absolutely. To
get works done. And you can see from the figures there's nearly 6,200 properties that have been protected for very small money.
Yeah, which is good news, and I welcome that. In relation to the road funds, and you'd know, coming from Galway and having visited the Roscommon area, and you know how badly we were hit and are still suffering the consequences of that last storm. Have you specific road budgets within your department, or is it all with the Department of Transport?
No, as you know, the local authorities get the roads budget from the Department of Transport, and in the area where roads have to be raised to accommodate where they have been raised, there's a funding mechanism which has been applied by the Department of Transport, and the local authorities apply for funding for that. We don't have a funding. Our primary objective is flood relief and emergency flood relief, and I suppose that's where we work. We don't have a funding for roads. That's transport provide the funding to local authorities for that, and they do provide special budgets, as you know, or have done last year in counties where flooding had caused damage to the roads.
But flood relief, as you know yourself, many roads have been cut off for a long period of time. Local businesses were closed, local schools were closed. People, if you take parts of South Roscommon where Lough Funchion is, which is still flooded, long after the flood, the heavy rainfall is gone. Would it not make sense that, in areas like that, that you would have a budget for roads?
Well, I suppose there's a danger here that we go spending our money that we should be doing our flood relief on roads. And I know, for instance, in Lough Funchion, that where any place along there where the roads were raised, the money was provided by the Department of Transport from their budgets. And there is money available for that to the local authorities. People are saying to me, and yourself, Deputy, you'll be on to me about getting works done here, there, in terms of flood relief. And that's my department. It's like saying to health, will you build a road because we cannot get into the house for the ambulance? They don't do that, so I can't do that. I don't have a budget for it. We don't get a budget for it, and we don't have the expertise that the local authorities have to construct roads or to reconstruct roads. Our expertise in the area of flood and flood relief, that engineering.
Okay, I want to deal with drainage maintenance for a moment or two, please, Chairman. In your statement here, and I do acknowledge you have taken a keen interest in looking at ways with the OPW as how we can possibly relieve some of the flooding issues, particularly along the River Shannon Basin. But you say here, in terms of drainage maintenance, the OPW continues to maintain all arterial drainage schemes completed under the 1945 Arterial Drainage Act. This investment provides ongoing protection to 650,000 acres of agricultural land, infrastructure and properties, to the maintenance of 11,500 kilometres of river channel, including 730 kilometres of embankments at an annual cost of 15 million. Separately, local authorities maintain 4,600 km of river channel, providing further localised flood protection. Can I put it to you and your officials that there's a reluctance to deal in many respects with the issue of drainage?
When you talk about drainage, I suppose the first thing I say to you is that, last year we spent 15,338,000 on channel clearing. 5 of that was actually spent in the tributaries coming into the Shannon. So we have spent money in let's say the Boyne, the Clyde, Monaghan, Inny, Brosness, Broadmeadow, the Corrib, the Moy, Donegal. So the deputy's gone. We did spend money there. Boyle, Bonnet, Field, Main, Deal, Shannon Embankments, Meg, Shannon Embankments North and South, Mulcair, Grudy, Killimer, Nina, Dunmanway. All of these areas, ongoing maintenance has been done year on year in the areas where we have a legal responsibility. In other areas, the local authorities have a responsibility, and in some areas, the responsibility is with the riparian owners.
Okay.
We've prepared some information for the riparian owners in how they can deal with their areas. And I suppose, you know, I know what you're thinking about is that there is people out there who say, you know, channel maintenance is what it's all about. But what we're doing on the Shannon at the moment is unprecedented. We actually have machines out there with the Waterways Ireland and the OPW, with the consultation with the National Parks and Wildlife, clearing areas down at Madden's Island and up again on the Shannon above Carrigan Shannon and Mount Campbell, both sides between Leitrim County Council and Roscommon County Council, working together. But what we're doing within the Shannon Group is to prepare a template that we'll be able to replicate in other areas where we have difficulties with channel clearing. So we're preparing that at the moment. Channel clearing is an issue that, as you know yourself, you're working in SACs most of the time, so you have to be very sensitive to what you do. So we're working on that.
In relation to Bordemona and the amount of silt and peat that, as you know and I know and obviously the officials know, has built up in the River Shannon over the years, because let's face it, Roscommon, Longford, Offaly, right along Bordemona have major works in that locality. Have you reached, or have you had any discussions with Bordemona in relation to a possible dredging scheme with them where some of that silt could be removed from the Shannon? Because I think we're dealing here with, I'm sure you agree yourself, that capacity has been taken up by the build-up of silt and other things on the Shannon. So we do need to get a dredging and drainage programme going as quickly as possible. So have we brought Bordemona on board? Or are there any possibility of them coming on board to even do on a pilot basis removing some of that silt?
Well, first of all, Bordemona are a stakeholder in the Shannon. They're part of the Shannon Group. They're part of the agreement to put the maintenance programme in place, which, as I said earlier, is unprecedented. And we're working. There's a working group now put together to identify works that we can do, and works which we can do fairly easily, and works which would take longer to do in terms of getting consents and the whole area of the environment and the Habitats Directive. So Bordemona are part of that. I actually met with Bordemona last year myself, and they are very, very cooperative, and they very much want to make sure that we bring a maintenance programme forward. And they also offered that over the winter that the low boglands could be used to flood water into them as attenuation ponds where if they were required. So what I would say is that Bordemona, yes, they're definitely on board. All of the agencies, or all of the stakeholders involved in the Shannon are all effectively signed up to working together to bring in a maintenance programme. And I would say as well, Deputy, that Bordemona, we talk about Bordemona and silt in the Shannon. I've looked at it myself, and there's other areas where silt is coming in from private bogs as well, which has to be looked at. And, you know, Bordemona, the amount that, you know, over the years, things were done, but now they work under a regime where they're being controlled by the EPA as to what they can and cannot put into the Shannon. Okay. And I raised that in my first meeting that I had with the Shannon Group as to what was being happened there. And I suppose the other area, just before I go, is you know, this whole area of the piloting the Loch Allen and Loch Ree and Loch Derg and the levels on it. And I think that again shows that this Shannon Group has mettle. It has demonstrated that it has mettle, and that it's actually working with intent to get things done, and that has been a success this winter, and it's been monitored on an ongoing basis. And I think all of the groups locally actually have recognised that things are being done in a cooperative way, and they're actually very cooperative as well. The local groups in Carrick-on-Shannon and the groups who met in Athlone at the conference and in Ballinasloe as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Minister. Now, previously, as you and I know and others know, the OPW has referred to the legal and contractual difficulties that they may run into delivering, flood relief schemes. And this is a very relevant issue. I'm sure you'd agree. Are we still dealing with problems, legal problems and contractual problems in relation to any of the works we're trying to carry out?
Always, when you're doing a project, as I said, which you're impacting on an SAC, you have to work with the rules and the directions and the habitats that are there, the directives that are there. You have to work within all of that. You have to work within the law. And what we're doing in the Office of Public Works is we're bringing all of the agencies who are involved, such as the National Parks and Wildlife, are cooperating very well with us, and the intent there is to get works done. But you just kind of say we're not being legally challenged, but we have to work within the law so that we won't be legally challenged and projects are not being held up. So it may take longer to get the project to where you need to get it, so that you avoid, like we had in, just to give an example, up in Galway City, where the outer bypass has been delayed effectively 10 years over. It ended up in the European courts. So what we do in the Office of Public Works is to make sure that we work with the agencies to get around or through the issues that are there, so that we can get a successful conclusion to the project without actually having a legal challenge. Okay,
and I'm coming to a conclusion. I'm going to finish with two very short questions. The possibility of a drainage scheme for landowners, because as you know, many landowners cannot afford to carry out necessary drainage works, and I have no doubt that this is an issue in relation to flooding. Is there any intention of bringing into being a scheme that could, alleviate some flooding difficulties that occur, because obviously farmers can't drain drains that are close to major roads or whatever? Now, Europe tell me this isn't a problem. There's not a problem with small drainage schemes that will alleviate flooding. So I'm wondering, is it something that's on your radar?
Where we have the riparian owners, we have prepared a document, or I don't know if it's complete yet. It's been completed, but we want to make sure that we have legal advice before we issue it, which will advise farmers on what to do, what they can and cannot do in terms of their own banks of land and beside the rivers. And I would also say that farmers I speak to, their biggest difficulty is not so much what it would cost to do it, is the fact that they don't know how to go about getting the permissions to do it. So what we're working at is trying to get that in place. And in fairness to the farmers that I've met, their whole idea is to make sure that they try and keep the water going so that it doesn't flood their land, so they have a vested interest in it. And they've never said that they want money to do it. What they say is, how do we go about doing it? And where do we go? And there is such a plethora of agencies they may have to satisfy, that what we're trying to do is to give them the guidance and help them in order that they can do the work.
Okay. Finally, I know that Deputy Sherlock has dealt with the issues of Cork, because I had some representation on that as well. So I won't hold you up at that. But
Deputy Murphy.
Sorry?
A national figure.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for that vote of confidence from a Kilkenny man. The voluntary home relocation scheme, I welcome the fact that that's going to come on stream in a couple of weeks. You said there's money ring-fenced for that this year. Have we an actual budget, size of budget for that?
You have a size of budget for this year is 2 million has been ring-fenced for this year. And that was announced last November when we announced we were bringing in the scheme. And one of the difficulties we have with the home relocation scheme is trying to identify exactly the quantity we're dealing with. So we have at this stage, probably would imagine that having talked to the local authorities and got back as much information as we can as to the potential relocation units we might have, that we could be talking about a 19 million budget in total. But to get the scheme up and running, we have a 2 million budget, and we will look for further funding in 2018 and 19 to continue on with the relocation scheme.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm conscious that we have to finish before 3, Minister, so I just want to ask